Thank you, Chris, and welcome to the Hancock County Commissioners Forum. I'm Doug Jenkins. To my left is County Commissioner Phil Riegel, the incumbent. To my right, Challenger Steve Oman. And we will start off with the opening statements. Mr. Oman won the coin flip, and we will start with you. You have 2 minutes.
Thanks, Doug. First, I'd like to thank the University of Findlay, WFIN, WKXA, and the Courier for sponsoring the event. That gives us an opportunity to discuss issues. A little about me. We operate a family farm with my son and my wife and my son and daughter-in-law out just about 3 miles from the city limits, southwest of Findlay. Been there all my life, lived in Eagle Township all my life. Been a past county commissioner, involved in a lot of local things. But everybody asks me why we're running for the county commissioner seat, and it's pretty simple. It's one reason. For the last 6 years, absolutely nobody has stepped up and taken ownership of the Blanchard River. It has to be cleaned. That's the first thing we have to do, and it's not being done. It's I guess I would say when I look at the river, it's almost a disgrace of where it's at today. Been a lot of things happen over the last few years. A lot of people said they can't say it, but we spent over $100,000 a mile studying the river, and not one of the things being proposed has anything to do with the river. And I guess coming from my ag background, it doesn't make sense to me.
All right, thank you, Steve. Now we'll go to Phil Riegel for his opening statements.
I also want to thank the University and Doug and for this opportunity, for all of Findlay Publishing. Appreciate their putting this on. My wife, my family, for all they've done to help me. I do greatly appreciate it. You know, honesty, integrity, decency. We talk about those ideals and concepts in very reverent terms. They're the foundation of our Republican form of government. Once lost, it's very difficult to return to those ideals. The form of government we hold as the best that we have starts to show cracks. In 2006, you elected me to this office because you believe I share those ideals of honesty, integrity, and decency. And over these last 8 years, I've worked hard to hold true to those ideals every day. So what do we mean when we say honesty, integrity, and decency? Well, first and foremost, it means telling the truth even if it's not very flattering. It means doing the right thing even if you think you can probably get away with doing the wrong thing. And finally, it means treating others with respect, treating each constituent, employee, and other elected official as someone who brings value to the community. This code helps you to build trust. And that trust is what allows you to begin to work together to accomplish the things otherwise impossible. That trust is what I've worked to develop over the last 8 years. I've developed good relationships and earned the trust of village leaders, township trustees, other county officials, as well as leaders in city government. And those relationships are not a matter of chance, but rather due to investment of time working on projects important to each group. The trust is also due to my respect for others and for the way in which I handle myself. It's much more difficult to find partners when you have people, when you with someone who has a questionable reputation or is a loose cannon. The necessary trust never fully develops because they're not someone you can count on. I am someone you can count on. Someone you can count on to bring family values to the table. Someone you can count on to be fair, open, and honest. Someone you can count on to do the right thing for the entire community. Thank you for your trust in me. And if you give me the opportunity, I will work hard every day for you for 4 more years.
So we'll start off with economic development in Hancock County. This question will be posed to both of you. We'll start with you, Mr. Riegel. When it comes to economic development, what is the county's role and what is on the horizon, or what should be on the horizon for the county?
Well, first and foremost, we've made a lot of progress over the last several years. You know, just since 2011, we've created 1,855 jobs here in Hancock County. That's just the job we know about. You know, county government is involved in economic development in several ways. One is you can help with infrastructure. We've certainly done that. We've worked on that. We've worked with partners on a potential industrial park that we're working on. We've worked on opening other areas for development as well. It's also with relationships with our private partners. I've worked hard to develop those relationships because economic development is a relationship game. I have those relationships. I've worked hard to forge those relationships with those folks to make sure that we're a partner. And if anything we can do, we will be there and we'll answer the bell. You know, over the last 3 years, we've had $320 million invested here in Hancock County by corporations, and that's a huge number. But that's not even where we're going. We think that within the next 12 to 18 months, that number will be doubled. And we've got some big projects in the pipeline that we're working on that we think will pop this year that will be great additions to our community.
Okay. Thank you. Same question to you, Mr. Oman. The county's role in economic development and where we need to head.
Well, as a county commissioner, the way we operated when I was a commissioner was your job was to deal with the private sector. A lot of times you'll get the phone call from a development director. In our particular case, it was either John Kovacs or Russ Robertson when I was there. And many times they would call me and say, we need to do this, we need to do that. The biggest thing that was always tough to do is when people come to town, they want to know what you're going to give them. And when you sit at that table, you've got to be able to say, we're able to give you something, or we have to deliver, or we can't do it. There's been many a time that I'd had a call. I've had relationships with school boards that you just got to build them. There's been times when you want to do some tax incentives where the school may give up a tax incentive, but they'll get a check in lieu of that. They call it payment in lieu of taxes. And you've got to be able to do that. I know Russ called me one time. He said, Steve, I got a 5-0 vote. And I went and talked to him, and I came back with a 4-1 vote in his favor, and my best friend still wouldn't come my way. So it's part of it. But the county commissioners need to build the infrastructure. You be able to put the deal together after the private sector does it.
Okay, time on that one. Let's continue on that right now, and sort of a follow-up, and I'll ask it to both of you. Phil, you brought up the question of more industrial parks, and those being in the works. Now, I said that we would wait to talk about flood mitigation in the second half, and we will for the most part, but a lot of things come back to that. When it comes to development of parks like this, what is the county's role in ensuring that they don't contribute to the greater problem of flood mitigation?
Well, working on regional detention, if you're talking about a park, is certainly part of it. Some of those you have to work with developers. That's some of the things we're doing right now on the potential site is to work with developers, look at regional detention, look at detention on site for the potential prospect that may be coming. All those things you want to play, and part of that is making sure that your detention is big enough. That's one thing we've worked hard on, is trying to make sure that we have enough detention so that water doesn't cause problems in those parks or cause problems to other areas of the city. So we think we've got good partners in those areas to come up with solutions to that. We think in the potential area right now, we think we've got some good solutions that we're working on. We think that not only can we make it attractive for people to come into the community, but also deal with detention and water on site.
All right. And the same question to you, Steve, role in developing industrial parks and its role in the flood mitigation process.
First of all, I take it you're talking about the new ones that they're talking about doing out north, I suppose, what you're talking about. Which, fortunately, they're definitely out of where you have to worry about the flood. But there's rules that you have to follow. We had to follow them. You can only let water discharge from a new development in as fast as it did before as a natural farmland in this particular case. But your job there is to make sure that you got the infrastructure to get that water where it needs to be. You can't put something in and all at once screw up everybody else in the area. You got to be able to have the infrastructure. You got to understand drainage. And it was one of the things that I kind of took pride in, because I dealt with drainage for the commissioner probably 30 years and had to deal with that in our own business. So really going to, when they come in and said we had to do it, I understood what we had to do.
All right. Second question goes to Mr. Oman, and we'll go to the topic of a health department merger. Where do you stand on merging the city and county health departments and why?
Doug, that thing's been going on for, I think, forever, ever since I was old enough to even care what happened to politics. Everybody knows how it's structured. It's structured. The county commissioners need to provide the facilities. Township trustees are the driving force behind it. They do different entities. I'm under the impression today that there's pretty good negotiations going on, trying to bring them back together. I'm the type person that I want the less government we have, the less bureaucrats we have, the better off we are. And I know I sat in a meeting and this was discussed before with the township trustees, and I was sitting there, and I'm sitting there and the comment was the city was coming here doing this, the county was doing this. Then all at once we had to worry about, well, the pay scale in the city is this and this. And we got 2 health directors. It absolutely makes no sense in my mind. We got 2 doctors head of the health department in Hancock County. But if we aren't able to get along and make these 2 entities go together, and they aren't comfortable in doing it, number one, you got to provide the service for
Okay. Real quick, just to sum up, would it be fair to say that you would be in favor under the right
If
circumstances?
the trustees and the city of Findlay can negotiate what needs to work for the townships and the city, yeah,
Okay.
no problem supporting it.
Mr. Regal, on the subject of the health department.
Well, this is where some of my attributes have come into play, because last year the DAC put together a discussion group to begin re-engaging the city about the potential health departments coming together in some form. And the DAC asked me to be a part of those talks, to represent the commissioners, but also be a part of those talks. And we've talked for about a year, and we've made a lot of progress, more progress than has ever been done. We took a lot of those issues that have been sandbagged over and over and caused it to derail. And we went through them systematically to deal with most of those issues. Now, I'm not here to say that it's a done deal, but we are closer than we've ever been. And I feel I've been a part of that, being a bridge builder between the two groups, but also making sure that we look out for the funders. And the funders are villages, townships, and the city. Because bottom line is, as we put this together, if it's going to happen, there has to be some savings. And so we've worked on that to make sure that that's also a part of these talks, that we're coming together, there needs to be some savings. And so we've worked on that pretty hard. I think we've made some good progress on that.
Okay, thank you.
The only question I got, and I didn't mention it, I mean, I follow state government. I mean, it's going to be dictated from Columbus. What happens to this thing? How far down the road, I don't know. But I've talked to some trustees and talked to me about it, and you know, down the road it's going to happen because it's going to be one of the state mandates. I mean, it happens all over the state, and when the state, you got a mandate to go, you're going to have to go. Where this thing at today, I cannot tell you. I kind of, well, like I said, the job of the county commissioners is to give them their facilities to operate out of, and that's what will happen.
Okay. Chance to address that?
Well, I mean, obviously, the role of county commissioner is more than just sitting and opening facilities. It's also being working with all different types of groups, and that's one thing I've done, to be able to work with both sides to deal with some of those issues that have caused problems over and over. And there's never been any talk about the state's going to force the city and the county to go. There may be some point where the state would say, well, we might want you to get larger, and maybe you go to Putnam County or whatever. But this is the first time where we've had a real opportunity for both the city and county health departments to come together. I feel like we've got really good momentum, and I think it's moving forward in a very positive way.
All right. Moving forward, and I believe this goes to Mr. Regal. Outside of flood mitigation, what is the county's biggest infrastructure need right now?
Well, you know, getting I guess in terms of the whole county, looking at the infrastructure we need around the industrial park is important, because obviously we need to be able to have infrastructure in place so that companies want to come and build here. So that's a big thing. That may be in the city, and maybe that's more city government's role, you know, obviously how that works out. But we've worked on that in other areas across in Distribution Drive. We've opened up some area there for some good development, working with a business owner to try to get some infrastructure in that area. You know, we also have some infrastructure issues with you know, our roads and bridges that we're trying to improve some of those things on. We've improved some of our paving rates. We're not where we probably need to be, but we're working on it with the engineer to try to do those things. We've got some ditches that continue to need some additional maintenance. We've got Dalzell and Oil Ditch that we just got petitions this week to the Commissioner's Office that we're going to move forward on. We're in partnership with the city. So those are all, obviously all important infrastructure projects.
Okay. Mr. Oman?
Sum it up real quick: roads and drainage. 2 words will do it. All you have to do is drive through the county, and the city's got the same problem. We just went through one of the worst winters, and I was talking to a couple of county employees the other day that was out patching potholes, and I mean, it's going to be a never-ending job this year. Plus, the bigger fact is our blacktop is getting thin. We're getting breaking away. I mean, our particular road was paved, I think, back in 1997, and you wouldn't believe it today. But anyway, that's where I would sum it up. Roads #1, drainage #2, and it's going to fit any place you go in Hancock County. And we'll talk about that later. I'll go back to the infrastructure in general. I don't care what it is, infrastructure. We're talking about infrastructure. It's getting, 80 years old, and in a lot of instances, I guess I'm more concerned about the infrastructure. I know there's things that need to be done in the justice system. We're talking about it's been talked about the misdemeanor facility's been kicked around a little bit. Don't know where it's going. I was a commissioner when we started the Rock, but the problem with the Rock was the judges couldn't mandate to go there. I mean, you had to go voluntary, so it's a lot easier for somebody to sit in jail and pay $25 to go out to the Rock. But the city took that over now, so how they're doing with that, I do not know. But it still comes. I think the biggest problem we've got in Hancock County is our infrastructure. It's either drainage or roads and bridges.
All right. Mr. Riegel.
Well, monitoring the budget is obviously one of the most important jobs the commissioners do, and it's always something we're going to continue to do. We've been through some pretty difficult times, and while we're in pretty decent shape right now, it wouldn't take a lot of an economic downturn to put us in more difficult times. We put $1 million in the rainy day fund that would help us through difficult times. It's the first time we've had that. And we've worked with our elected officials, and I think that's very important. We've been able to work with elected officials through difficult times. We reduced our budget by about 20% over a year and a half, 2 years. You didn't hear hue and cry. You didn't hear anything. Elected officials worked together to come up with the solutions. We did that. I think, obviously, also the opiate issue. That's a major issue in our community. It's costing us lots of money in criminal justice. It's also costing us lots of loss in families. Not only the loss of folks, but also the tearing of the fabric of the family. So, we are involved in that. I am very involved in opiates. Epidemic task force been involved in that and trying to come up with solutions in that area as well.
Okay, thank you. We'll stay in the sort of the realm of infrastructure now. I think I've talked with both of you about the importance of the landfill and how that's a revenue generator for the county. Let's talk a little bit about how, through some proposed state regulations, that could change the impact that could have on us, and how your role as a commissioner would be to fight to keep that revenue local. I believe the question goes to you, Phil, first.
Well, one of the things last year, there have been some proposals on, potentially taking away flow control or those sorts of things, taking away the management of the solid waste district and possibly the landfill from local communities. I worked with Farm Bureau to actually put that in their platform at the state level to say, well, we don't want that. We want counties who have landfills to be able to still be in control of those landfills, be in control of flow control when you have debt. And we have worked hard to keep the landfill at a lowest cost as we can, but also allow us to expand so that we can have more than a few more years of life. We now have 40 to 50 years of life left in the landfill. That's due to our work to improve and get some land around there so we can go to different cells. We some horizontal movement on some of those once the final cap is done on the current cell. And that's important because that keeps your waste costs down. I think that's very important.
Thank you. Mr. Elvin, the commissioner's role in protecting the landfill asset.
It's been 10 years, I guess, since I was had to deal with this infrastructure at landfill. But keeping space was one of the things. One of the issues that came up, and he hit it right there, was flow control. I'm a pretty private sector person, and I think even though you're government, you need to be able to compete. And that was a hot issue when I was a commissioner because we had fills. We had to be able to compete with other landfills. And when you didn't compete with other landfills, you would turn around and have things coming in that you didn't want in. We could fill that landfill up instantly. You probably have the situation too. You'll get calls from New York. They'll bring garbage in there in a heartbeat. We got a railroad right out there. But the bottom line, that landfill was for us. But to tell somebody that you have to haul your stuff there, I had a problem with it when I was a commissioner then. And we was fortunate enough we was able to keep going. But if you can be competitive and not use the government's hammer to make it competitive, it makes a big difference. But that's a horse of a different color. Someday, someplace down the road, we discussed that landfill probably will not be a Hancock County landfill. It's just going to be one of these things that gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and somebody's going to step away and do it.
And there's time on that one. A few more questions before we take our break here. This one, pretty basic one, I think we hear it at just about every forum, is how are you better suited to be a county commissioner? We'll start with Mr. Owen.
Well, first of all, I said when I started, when I came back to the table, I'm coming for one reason. It's called nobody stepped up to clean the river. And it happened Phil decided to make it political at the forum, like the newspaper had in the headlines. But when you come back and I want to get that river cleaned, and once we hear all the ways why we can't do it. Well, when I was a commissioner, we had to mitigate deal with the EPA at the landfill. It's a 14-acre wetland out there we had to do. All you have to do, everything that wants to be done has to have the same permits for all the new stuff. It takes the same permits to do the other. You've got to have a 404 permit to dredge the river. You've got to have to deal with the EPA. You've got to mitigate if it's a mussel, if it's a Indiana bat. You've got to be able to set down the EPA. And I'll guarantee you, if I'm elected, first 2 weeks of January of 2015, we will have that meeting with the EPA, and you will be sitting there, and the Courier will be sitting there, because I want the EPA to tell me that the Indiana bat and a mussel is more important than the people who live in the Black River watershed.
Okay. Mr. Regal, how you're better qualified?
Well, I think you look at my background and you look at what we've been able to accomplish. I think there's a stark difference. I think if you look at the fact that we have been working to clean the river in a more aggressive way than ever before, including the 8 years my opponent was in office, I think that's a clear difference. I think where we're at on economic development, with the private and public sector working together, I think those relationships that I've developed, I think that's a clear difference. I think that my demeanor with other elected officials, I think that's important. You know, respect is a very important thing in the county government. And also background, education, all those things are important. So I bring all those things to the table. I'm able to disagree with people, but still have a discussion. And I think going forward, that's what we need, because we've got some difficult issues we have to face. But we need people who are willing to talk, work through things, come up with the best solutions, and move forward as a community together. So I think that unity part, I think that's important. I think looking forward, progress is also very important. And representing all constituents, I think, is very important.
Okay. Final question before our break here. Let's talk about office space and operating space for the county. There's been a lot of recent additions or moving of offices. Does the county now have adequate operating space, in your opinion? Do there need to be more changes in office locations? And what should be done with the Broadway location where the county offices were formerly located? Mr. Regal, we'll start with you.
Well, we certainly took a big hit in the 07 flood. And my opponent didn't have, when he bought some certain buildings, didn't get flood insurance on some of those buildings, and it took a pretty big hit. But we've recovered. You know, we're now at the point where we have stability in those areas. We have stability in the offices. We're now in the county commissioner's office, the prosecutor's office. We've purchased the buildings. We've gotten leases that are stable. And I think they're accessible. All those things are important, because the bottom line is the public needs to be able to use the governmental services that we provide. So having them in the places that we have now are much more accessible than they were. The 222 building, we had $250,000 worth of work orders that need to be done immediately. We didn't think that was worth putting any more money into that building. In fact, when I first came in office in 2007, I asked our maintenance folks, what's the worst building we have? And they said, that 222 building. I said, get out of it if you can. So we've been looking at that, trying to figure out ways to do that. And so I think finally we have stability in our at least medium-term needs in terms of office space.
Okay, thank you. In terms of office space, additional needs?
Well, I guess I'm going to radically disagree. The county commissioners, prior to 9/11, we had a vision and a focus. Clear back in the 1960s, Marathon and the city, they came to the county. They wanted to have a multi-city county building setting right where the footage that we had south of the courthouse. It was kind of a long-term goal. It's kind of an unwritten rule, and I went as a county commissioner anytime you had an opportunity to get the properties that you needed between Crawford Street, South Street, West Main Cross, and Main. It's called Government Center. And it was kind of an unwritten rule, and we worked towards that. And we were close to doing until 9/11 hit us, and that's when the economy went like that. But when I'm going to follow up on that, I have a problem when all the other businesses on Main Street, businesses right beside the commissioner's office, were back in business right away. But when you head to the county building, we had a Media One building that I think it was a shame it went down. We also had a building, I will say one thing. They went down.
Make it a quick wrap.
They spent $3 million going 3 blocks away from the courthouse to put a commissioner's, prosecutor's office above a restaurant. We've got a Fortune 500 company right across the street, and a probation department on the side where they have to come in that alley to go to that, with no parking besides.
Tell you what, we'll do a rebuttal and a response before we go to break. I imagine you want to talk about that.
Well, we paid about a little under $1 million for the building at 514 South Main Street. And the appraisal was actually more than what we paid for it. So that doesn't make any sense in what my opponent's saying. He's not grounded in fact. We have finally gotten some stability. We've worked with the city because of partnerships to provide some of the parking that our employees need. We haven't had those types of issues. We certainly would continue to work on that, and we certainly are willing to try to find some of those things. But after the flood, we had certain requirements. We worked with the zoning inspector from the city. Said you're going to have to raise things. You're going to have to do this. It didn't make sense to put money into some of those old buildings. We didn't have a couple $1 million to put into those old buildings and make them better. Now, the private sector did, and so they have invested in those types of things. But we looked for office space that was reasonable and would provide us with some medium-term, maybe potentially long-term stability. We've done that, and it's very important for our community.
Okay. Mr. Oman, a final response, and then we'll go to our break
To
here.
clarify my $3 million, all you have to do is add up the numbers, and that's what ended up in that building on south of the courthouse. But there again, you talked about what we couldn't use that there. One of the nicer looking buildings right now is the RCM building that went right where our county offices was. You made the comment about we worked with the city to get parking for employees. Government's to serve people, not employees. You tell me where people park to go see the county commissioners on the second floor above a restaurant. We don't have it down there. We could have had plenty of parking. If all you got to do is if you walk out the back of the courthouse and look, I mean, it's wide open. And that's where we used to have. Now we got a building that I'll agree with totally. That building should have came down when we were there. The building, the annex building, we used to call it. Probably it's the poorest building the county owned. But bottom line, if either you took it down, we had parking, we could serve people who could come in and serve government. And today, how do you get to the county commissioner? A lot of people don't even know where the county commissioner's office is.
All right. With that, we will take a break. When we come back in our Commissioners Forum, we'll discuss flood mitigation and everything involved in that. We'll be back after this.